What do you even say when a man calmly hands you divorce and custody papers in a crowded lobby and calls it the proper way to answer your lies? How did a few harmless secret texts turn into screenshots, bank records, and a judge reading my own messages out loud while my family stared? Why did I think I could hide behind privacy when my own child put the evidence right in his hands? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Isola, and I still do not think I am the villain in this story. People hear the end and rush to judge, but they never had to live my life day by day with a man who made everything so small and quiet. From the outside, Daniel looks like a good husband. He pays bills on time. He comes home after work. He plays with our daughter. But you can live with someone like that and still feel like you are slowly drying out inside. That is what I tell myself, even now. That morning started like most mornings. I stood in the kitchen in my old leggings, making toast, phone propped up against the sugar jar. My work group chat was already buzzing. Marco had sent a meme, something silly about Mondays. I smiled a little too much at my screen while I spread jam. Daniel walked in, hair still messy from sleep, and went straight to the coffee machine without even glancing at me. He asked if I'd washed his blue shirt. I said I was busy. Maybe he could do laundry sometimes too. He went quiet. I remember thinking he cared more about that shirt than about me. My phone lit up again. Marco asked if I survived the weekend with Mr. Serious. I typed back a joke about being in emotional prison. It was just words, jokes, but I liked them. I liked the attention. Daniel glanced over and asked who I was talking to so early. I said it was just work stuff and that he was being nosy. He said he just wanted to know what made me smile like that, because it had been a while since I smiled at him. That line annoyed me. It felt like guilt, like a net. I told him he was imagining things, and that I did not have energy for drama before 9 in the morning. Mara came running into the kitchen then, hair sticking up, clutching her stuffed bunny. She asked if she could play a game on my phone. I said maybe later, because I wanted to finish my chat. Daniel said I should put the phone down and sit with her for breakfast, but he said it in that calm, careful way that makes him sound like a teacher, not a husband. I told him not to tell me how to parent in my own kitchen, and I pointed out he was the one hiding behind his coffee cup every morning. Mara went quiet and stared at her cereal. I remember feeling a tiny sting of guilt and telling myself it was his fault for starting it. I had a call with my mother while I walked Mara to the playground later. I put in my earbuds and pushed the stroller, even though Mara was too big for it now. It just kept her still. I told my mum that Daniel had started to act paranoid about my phone, that he asked who I was talking to and what about. I said it like he had screamed, like he had grabbed me. He had not done that, but it sounded better that way. My mother said men who act like that are usually hiding something themselves, and that I should not let him control me. She said a woman my age deserves to feel admired, especially after having a child. I liked hearing that. It sounded like permission. At the playground, Kelsey waved at me from a bench. She already had her iced coffee and her sunglasses up on her head like a crown. I sat beside her while Mara ran to the slide. I told Kelsey that Daniel had turned into the phone police. I rolled my eyes and said he wanted to check my messages like I was a teenager. She laughed and said that was toxic, that she would never allow a man to look through her phone. I did not say he had only asked once, very softly, when we were supposed to be scrolling for movie options together. Why mention that? I said he interrogated me instead. The word felt big in my mouth, strong. It made me feel like the injured one. Kelsey asked if someone at work had caught my eye. I said there were just friendly co-workers, nothing serious. She raised an eyebrow. I added that one of them actually noticed my hair, unlike my own husband. That was true. Marco had joked about my haircut, called it dangerous. Daniel had said something nice too, but it was late at night, half asleep in bed. That does not count the same, so I left it out of the story. I told Kelsey I felt invisible at home, like a maid with a ring. She said I deserved a man who worshipped me. The word worship made my chest feel warm. I said respect follows results, and I had results. Job, child, house, mostly in order. Why did I also have to carry his feelings? When we got back to the apartment in the afternoon, Daniel's father was just leaving. Gareth gave Mara a hug and patted my arm. He asked lightly how things were going. I said we were fine, just normal couple stuff. Daniel stood behind him in the hallway, face blank. Gareth said maybe we could have a family dinner soon and talk things through. I heard that as him taking Daniel's side, offering some calm lecture I did not want. After he left, I told Daniel that even his father thought he was being cold, twisting Gareth's kindness into a criticism. Daniel said he was only trying to understand me. I said if he could not see how tired I was, he was not trying at all. That night, the apartment felt strangely quiet. Mara was in her room building a tower with blocks. I was at the table, scrolling through messages, laughing a little at something Marco sent. Kelsey had sent a screenshot of our chat from the playground and captioned it, "Phone Police," with a laughing emoji. It made me feel seen. Daniel came in from the hallway and watched me for a second. He asked if we could talk later about how we were doing. I said I did not want another sad lecture and that he needed to stop making everything about my phone. He sighed, went to the sink, rinsed his mug, and placed it on the counter with this careful little click, like he was holding himself back. As he turned to leave, I saw his phone light up on the counter. A calendar reminder flashed on the screen. Meeting, personal. My eyes narrowed. He noticed me looking and flipped his phone face down. I asked what that was. He said it was nothing, just an errand, and that he had a right to privacy too. The way he said too bothered me. It sounded like an accusation. I told him he was being dramatic, that if he wanted trust, he should start by trusting me. He nodded once, but his jaw tightened. Mara wandered in then, sleepy and soft, and climbed onto his leg. She asked if she could play a game on my phone now. I handed it to her without thinking, because I wanted to finish reading Marco's latest message. She sat at the table, tiny fingers tapping the screen. My own phone buzzed in her hands. A new preview slid across the top with Marco's name and a line that was not so innocent. I saw Daniel's eyes shift to the screen. Without a word, he reached over and turned my phone face down next to his. For a second, both phones lay there between us like closed mouths. I told myself he had no right to look, that he was the one crossing a line, not me. I had no idea that in that small moment, the story was already starting to slip out of my hands. The clinic always felt brighter than our apartment. Maybe it was the harsh white lights. Maybe it was the way people actually looked at me there. At home, I was just Mum and, "Can you grab my blue shirt?" At the clinic, I was Isola from front desk, the one patients smiled at and doctors joked with when they had a minute. And most days, Marco's smile was the first one I saw. He leaned on the reception counter that morning while I logged in. He asked if I survived another weekend with Mr. Serious. I laughed and said it had been long and quiet. I did not say Daniel had made pancakes with Mara and brought me a coffee in bed. It did not fit the image. Marco said I deserved someone who actually took me out, that he would die if his weekends were that boring. It was easy to let those words sink in. My phone stayed close to my hand all morning. When patients checked in, I did it with one hand and typed with the other. Marco sent little comments about the people we saw. He told me my new lipstick was dangerous. I said it was just a cheap brand. He said it did not matter, that it made my eyes stand out. I felt my cheeks get warm even though I pretended to roll my eyes. It did not feel like cheating. It felt like being noticed. Around mid-morning, my screen lit up with Daniel's name. He asked how my day was going and what time I thought I would be home. He added that maybe we could talk that night. I stared at the message for a while. It looked heavy. Talk meant another serious face, Another quiet question about my phone. I left him on read and tucked the device under a file. I told myself I would answer later, when I had more energy. Marco noticed me staring at the phone. He asked if Homebase was checking in. I said Daniel liked to keep tabs on me and had become obsessed with my screen. I said he could not stand it if I smiled at anything that was not him. Marco shook his head and said that was a bad sign, that jealous men were boring and dangerous in their own way. The word dangerous made me feel dramatic and important. I let it sit. Lunch was a salad eaten over the keyboard. Daniel called once more. I silenced it and typed that I was in the middle of something important at work. That was technically true. I was in the middle of a chat. He replied that he understood, but hoped we could find time later. I told myself he was guilt-tripping me. It was easier than feeling sorry. In the late afternoon, the manager asked if I wanted to join a few people for drinks after closing. Marco raised his eyebrows at me like it was our shared secret. I said I needed to check with Daniel, but I did not actually ask him. Instead, I sent a message saying there was a team meeting and I would be back late. He replied that he wished he had more notice, but that he would handle Mara's dinner and bedtime. He added a small note that he missed spending evenings together. I read that as clingy instead of kind. The rooftop bar was only a few blocks away. It was one of those places with fake plants on the walls and loud music that made it hard to think. I liked it. It felt young. The sky looked orange and purple around the buildings. I ordered a drink that came in a big glass with too much ice. Marco sat next to me, close enough that our knees touched when someone squeezed past. Everyone started talking about relationships, as people always do once there is enough alcohol. Someone complained about her boyfriend who played video games all night. I said she should be grateful he was at least honest. I said some husbands pretend to be supportive, but really want to control everything, even your phone. The table went quiet for a second. Then Kelsey, who had joined us from her own job, asked what I meant. This was my chance to set the story. I told them Daniel had tried to go through my messages. I said he panicked if I laughed at a joke that was not his. I said he acted like a jailer with a key instead of a partner. The words sounded good, strong. No one needed to know he had simply asked who I was texting while we watched TV. No one needed to know he had never actually grabbed my phone. I watched their faces twist with anger on my behalf, and I liked it. Kelsey pulled out her own phone and recorded a short video of me making a tired face, with Marco in the background pulling a mock-sad expression. She said we were survivors of phone police husbands and typed a silly caption. I laughed and leaned into the camera. My cheeks were warm. My heart was even warmer. Somewhere in the middle of all this, Daniel sent another message asking if everything was okay, because I had not checked in. I did not answer. It felt nice to ignore him while other people listened to me. Later, when the sun was gone and the city lights took over, Marco nudged my shoulder. He said I looked too good to be wasting my time on a man who did not worship me. That word came back again. Worship. It sat heavy and sweet in my chest. I said Daniel had become dull and bitter, that sometimes I felt like a single mother with an extra roommate. It was not fully true, but it got me the reaction I wanted. Marco shook his head and told me I could do better. No one at that table defended my husband. That felt like proof I was right. I left the bar in a rideshare, the wind pressing against the window. My phone buzzed constantly in my hand. Marco sent a message saying he wished I did not have to go home yet. He added a little heart. Kelsey sent screenshots of our own jokes from the table with laughing emojis. Daniel's messages were buried under them, small lines about Mara being asleep and the leftover pasta in the fridge. I skimmed them and then scrolled back to Marco. By the time I reached our building, I had decided to come in with a light mood, maybe pretend everything was normal. I tossed my hair once in the elevator, checked my reflection in the metal doors. In my head, I rehearsed my lines. Long meeting, team stuff, nothing serious. Easy. The apartment was dim, lit only by the small lamp near the couch. Mara's toys were stacked in a basket. The dishes were done. Daniel sat at the table with his laptop open and a few papers spread out. It looked strange, too organized. He stood when I came in and asked if I had a good time. His voice was calm. I said it was just work people and that he should not act jealous. He said he was not jealous, just trying to keep track of money and time. As I moved closer, I saw the screen of his laptop. Our bank app was open, numbers lined up in neat rows. Beside it, a printed spreadsheet lay half inside a folder with the word household written on the tab. He slid the paper fully inside the folder before I could focus on the details. I dropped my phone onto the counter, trying to look casual. Right away, the screen lit up with a new message from Marco, the preview showing his name and a tiny red heart. Daniel's eyes flicked to it for a fraction of a second. His hand rested on the household folder, fingers tapping once before he clicked it shut. The next day, I woke up mad before anything had even happened. That is what bothered me the most about Daniel lately. Nothing had to actually go wrong for me to feel wronged. My body would remember his quiet face from the night before and decide it was already tired. He was already up when I came into the kitchen, packing Mara's snack for preschool. There was a neat little line of carrot sticks and crackers on the counter. He asked if I had slept okay. I said I would sleep better if certain people stopped counting my drinks and my messages. He frowned a little and said he was only worried. I told him worry was just control with a soft voice. While he finished packing the bag, I leaned against the counter and opened my phone. Marco had sent a message late at night that I had missed, something about me being too bright for that apartment. I smiled as I read it. Daniel glanced over at my expression again. He did not say anything, which almost felt worse. I decided silence was an insult. On the way to preschool, I called my mother and put her on speaker while Mara kicked her feet in the back seat and sang to herself. I told my mom that Daniel had started watching my phone like a hawk, that he stared at my screen every time it lit up. I said he would probably install tracking apps if he knew how. She gasped and said that was not normal, that he sounded possessive. I watched myself in the mirror as I told the story, edited it live. I did not mention that he had not actually picked up my phone, only looked at the screen when I dropped it in front of him. Why add that part? It would soften things, and I did not want soft. I dropped Mara off, accepted her sticky kiss, and went back home to change before work. Daniel was at the table again, this time without the laptop. Just a mug of coffee and a notepad with a list. I could see rent, utilities, and groceries written in his neat handwriting. He said we needed to talk about a few things when I got back from work, that we could not keep going like this. I said I agreed, because I also was tired of being treated like a child. He looked puzzled, like we were in two different scenes of the same movie. At the clinic, the day was normal. Patients came and went. Marco made faces whenever someone annoying stood at my desk. At lunch, he sent me a sticker of a cat hiding behind a phone and asked if I was in phone prison, at home again. I told him yes, that my husband had started treating my mobile like a shared property item. Marco said that was gross and asked why I stayed. It was a light question for him, but it sunk hard in me. By the time I came home, I had built a whole case in my head about how unfair Daniel was. He greeted me at the door and took my bag. Mara ran in from the living room, shouting about a cartoon. The TV hummed in the background. Dinner was already cooking. For a moment, I almost felt grateful. Then I remembered the heart emoji from Marco on my counter the night before, and the way Daniel had looked at it. The feeling turned sharp again. We ate at the small table. Mara told a long story about something that happened at preschool. Daniel laughed at the right parts and asked her questions. He was a good father. I knew that. I just did not want to think about it too much. It made my own position shakier. After dinner, I set my phone on the table while I wiped crumbs. A new message from Marco appeared, only the first few words visible. Something about last night's dress and how he could not stop thinking about it. My stomach fluttered. I tapped the screen quickly, more from habit than fear, and the message thread opened full screen. Then Mara called for me from the living room, asking if I could help with her blocks. I walked away, leaving the phone unlocked on the table, barely thinking. Mara has always loved my phone. In her mind, it is more toy than tool. When she saw it sitting there with the bright colors of the chat showing, she climbed up on the chair and grabbed it. I heard her little voice from the kitchen doorway, excited. She ran toward Daniel with the phone held up like a prize. She said there was a funny cat sticker and asked him to look. By the time I turned, it was already in his hands. He was not even trying to take it from her. She had pushed it into his palm herself. For a second, he did not understand what he was seeing. His eyes moved across the screen, reading. The thread was right there. Weeks of messages, emojis, half-flirty jokes that had slowly become full flirty. Pictures of me, some in work clothes, some in the mirror at home. Marco's words under each one, my replies. It was all framed by the soft pink chat bubbles and Mara's sticky fingerprints on the glass. I walked back into the room, heart thumping in my ears. Daniel looked up at me, still holding the phone. His face was blank, but his knuckles were white around the edges. He asked, very quietly, how long this had been going on. I said I did not know what he meant. He tilted the phone slightly so I could see the screen. My own words, staring back. My first instinct was not guilt, it was anger. I snatched the phone from his hand and told him he had no right to look at my private messages, especially not in front of our daughter. I said he had used her to get access to my phone, even though I had watched her give it to him with my own eyes. He said he had not asked for it, that she just wanted to show a sticker. I told him that was convenient. He did not raise his voice. That almost broke my brain. He just said he could not unsee what he had seen. He asked if I was in love with Marco, or if this was just for fun. The question felt insulting. I rolled my eyes and said it was just jokes, that he was blowing harmless texting into cheating to make himself feel like a hero. I told him that if he had given me attention, I would not have needed external validation. I remember using that phrase, like I was in therapy instead of in my kitchen. Mara watched us with wide eyes, holding her bunny to her chest. I caught her looking between our faces, as if waiting for someone to tell her which expression she should copy. I felt a small twist of shame and pushed it down by talking louder. I told Daniel he was trying to control me, that he was the problem, not my phone. I said everyone has private chats. He said, still calm, that he had never hidden anything from me, that I was free to pick up his phone any time. I replied that his openness did not give him the right to invade my privacy. He went very still then. Something in his eyes closed, like a door. He said he needed some time to think. He took Mara to her room, helped her pick pajamas, and read to her. I listened from the hallway, irritated at how steady his voice was. No shouting, no drama, just quiet reading. It made it hard to paint him as a monster, so I focused on the fact that he had seen my messages. When Mara was asleep, he came back to the kitchen. He asked if we could sit down and talk honestly. I crossed my arms and said there was nothing to talk about if he was going to twist jokes into betrayal. He sighed once, like something heavy had finally landed on his chest. Then he went into the small guest room that we almost never used. I heard the soft click of the door. A few minutes later, a low hum started up. The printer. It had been quiet for months, but now it whirred to life. I walked down the hallway and peeked through the slight gap in the door. Daniel sat at the desk, my message thread with Marco open on his laptop, the screen's glow pale on his face. He was scrolling slowly and hitting a key every so often. The printer on the shelf beside him spat out page after page. My name and Marco's name sat in bold at the top of each sheet. The date and time stamped the margin of every line. Emotional prison. Phone police. Comments about how boring my weekends were. I watched one page slide out, my own words printed in black and white. then saw Daniel reach over and gather the stack with careful hands. He placed the pages into a pile and closed a new folder on the desk. Before I could see what he named it, he got up and walked toward the door. I stepped back into the shadow of the hallway. The door closed gently but firmly. I told myself he was being dramatic, building some stupid file just to scare me. It did not occur to me yet that every joke I had told about him was now a receipt he could hold, and that I had handed him most of it myself, or rather, that Mara had. The next morning, Daniel did not wake up beside me. His side of the bed was cold and flat. For a few seconds I thought he had gone to work early, but his work clothes were still hanging on the chair. When I walked down the hallway, I saw the guest room door half open. He was lying on that narrow bed, still in his t-shirt and shorts, one arm over his eyes. The sight annoyed me more than if he had shouted. Sleeping in the guest room made him look like the victim, like he had been pushed out. He heard me and sat up. He said he had not slept well and needed space to clear his head. I told him only cowards slept in spare rooms, instead of facing their problems. He did not argue. He just said we would talk later, after he got Mara to preschool. He moved past me, smelling faintly of toner from the printer that had run half the night. That smell followed him like some quiet accusation. While he helped Mara put on her shoes, I leaned in the bedroom doorway and watched. He was gentle with her. He told her they were going to have a good day and that she could show him her drawings later. In my head, I twisted that into a performance, something he was doing just so he could say he was the better parent. I told myself he was using her as a shield. After they left, I called my mother and told her everything, or at least my version. I said Daniel had grabbed my phone out of our child's hands and dug through my messages. I said he had been spying on me for weeks, printing out my conversations like some courtroom drama. I used words like invaded and violated. I did not mention that Mara had pushed the phone into his hand herself, or that he had barely raised his voice. My mother gasped and said that sounded obsessive. She asked if he had ever threatened to take Mara away. I hesitated, then said he had talked about stable routines, if things stayed like this, which I turned into a threat in my mouth. She told me to come over that afternoon, to bring Mara later and talk in person. She said I needed to protect myself. That word sat nicely with the others. Protect, violated, obsessive. When I looked at my own reflection in the bathroom mirror, I almost believed I was in danger. At Rosa's house, the living room smelled of strong coffee and old furniture polish. She set out cookies for Mara and tea for us. I sat on her couch and told the story again, polishing it. I said Daniel had spent the night printing my private messages instead of talking to me like an adult. I said he had made me feel like a criminal for needing attention. I said he was cold, distant, and now punishing me by sleeping in another room. Rosa shook her head and said, "A man who acts like that is not safe for a woman's heart." She told me I should make sure my own accounts were in my name. She said I worked hard and should not let him control every euro. She hinted I should start putting a little aside just in case. I nodded, even though the rent and most bills already came from Daniel's careful planning. Still, it felt good to imagine I was the one under threat, not the one who had created it. Mara played on the rug with some old dolls. Every now and then she looked over when we said her father's name. At one point she asked why Daddy had slept in the small bed the night before. I told her he was being silly and dramatic, that he wanted attention. I said sometimes grown-ups have to sleep in different rooms when they are not getting along. I did not say that I liked him in the guest room because it made it easier to paint him as cold. In the evening, back at our apartment, I opened the front door and heard Mara's laughter coming from her room. Daniel was sitting on the floor with her, building a tower with blocks. He looked up and asked if I had a good time at my mother's place. I said my mother was worried about his behavior. He just nodded. He said he hoped we could keep adult conversations away from Mara, that she should not feel like she has to pick sides. I told him he was the one making sides by moving into the guest room. We ended up in the bedroom, standing on opposite sides of the bed. He said he could not pretend everything was normal after reading those messages. He said he needed to think about what was best for Mara. I told him it was always about her for him, that he never cared about how I felt as a woman. I said if he had given me more attention, I would not have had to look elsewhere. He stared at me for a long moment, like he could not recognize me. Then he said he did not want to fight. He picked up his pillow and walked back to the guest room. Later that week, on a sunny afternoon, I met Kelsey at the playground again. The benches were full of parents with coffee cups. Kids screamed and laughed around the slide. It was not a private space at all, which suited me. I wanted people to hear. I told Kelsey how Daniel had threatened to change Mara's routine if I did not behave. I said he was using her as a weapon. I said he was controlling, jealous, and creepy with my phone. I did not mention that his actual words had been about stability and structure. Kelsey shook her head and said she did not like the sound of him. She told me to think about leaving before he broke me. Her voice was loud enough that 2 other mothers nearby glanced over. I leaned back and let my own voice carry. I said I refused to live with a man who watched my phone every second and slept in another room like some silent judge. I said I felt unsafe emotionally. That word echoed in the air. Unsafe. It sounded serious, important. I saw one of the mothers pull her child a little closer and look at me with sympathy. Good, I thought. At least someone sees what I am dealing with. On the walk home, I scrolled through my messages. Leah, Daniel's sister, had seen some of Kelsey's posts and sent a short text asking if everything was okay. I replied that her brother was acting controlling and trying to punish me over a few harmless jokes. Her answer came back slower than usual. She said she did not want to get in the middle. That annoyed me. In my head, not siding with me was the same as taking his side. When we got to the apartment building, I saw Gareth's car pull away from the curb. Daniel was at the entrance, waving goodbye. He looked tired, but focused. I asked if his father was filling his head with ideas about leaving me. Daniel said they had just talked about practical things. He said Gareth thought we both needed to calm down and think about the future. I snapped that his whole family liked to talk like managers instead of humans. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of toner again, mixed with something like fresh coffee and paper. In the kitchen, next to the calendar, a yellow sticky note clung to the fridge. On it, in Daniel's neat block letters, were the words, "Bring forms." In the same square on the calendar, he had written, "Downtown, 10:40 a.m." The note made my stomach twist for a second. Forms for what? I told myself it was probably about work, maybe some insurance thing. Daniel came in behind me, keys in hand. As he hung them on the hook, I noticed a new silver key on his ring that had not been there before. It was small and plain, not like our house keys. Mara pointed at it and asked what the shiny key was. Daniel said it was just something for his errands, nothing we needed to worry about. His voice was calm, but his eyes did not quite meet mine. I told myself I would not let him scare me with little mysteries. Still, my gaze kept sliding back to the sticky note and that blank word, forms, as if it already had my name printed somewhere I could not see. Mara's 5th birthday came faster than I expected. It felt strange that life kept moving, that there could still be balloons and cake, while my marriage felt like it was cracking. I decided that if everything else was messy, at least the party would be perfect. I booked a community hall with a soft play area and cheap decorations. I told myself I was doing it for Mara, but part of me wanted an audience. It is easier to be the victim when people are watching. On the morning of the party, I woke up to the sound of Daniel's alarm, not mine. He had already gotten up and was in the kitchen, packing snacks into containers. He was cutting fruit into careful little pieces, arranging them in plastic boxes. I walked in, and said I didn't remember agreeing to do a health nut party. He said kids could have fun without bags of sugar. I made a joke about him turning into a school brochure. He did not rise to it. He just asked if I had the guest list and if Rosa needed a lift. We loaded the car with decorations, paper plates, and 2 boxes of cheap party favors. Mara bounced near the door in her new dress, excited and sticky with impatience. Daniel strapped her into her seat, talking to her about the games they could play. I scrolled my phone in the front, answering messages from Kelsey and a couple of other parents. I told them Daniel was already sulking and acting like the party was a chore. That was not quite true. He was just quiet, but quiet is easy to twist. The community hall was one of those big, bland rooms with pale walls and a faded mural of balloons on one side. A few plastic tables sat in a line. The soft play area was fenced off with bright foam mats. Daniel went to work right away, laying out food, taping up streamers, checking the music speaker. I took photos of him standing alone at the snack table, his shoulders slightly hunched, and sent one to Kelsey with a caption about miserable husbands at kids' parties. It made me laugh. She replied with laughing emojis and said I should post it. I did, with a playful caption about doing it all, in spite of grumpy co-hosts. Guests started arriving. Kids ran straight for the soft play area. Adults lingered by the tables with coffee cups. Rosa came in with a big gift bag and a bigger voice. She hugged me and told me I looked tired, then asked in a low tone if Daniel had calmed down yet. I rolled my eyes and said he was still acting like a prison guard who happened to be good at slicing apples. She snorted and shook her head. She looked at him like he was a problem that could be solved with enough gossip. Daniel's father came next with Leah. He carried an old camera and a small box wrapped in simple paper. Leah hugged Mara and then came over to me. She asked how I was in that measured way people use when they know something is wrong. I said I was fine, but that her brother was making everything difficult over a few texts. Leah's jaw tightened. She said she didn't know the details and didn't want to choose sides. I took that as betrayal, even though it was just honesty. During the first half of the party, Daniel did most of the work. He organized musical chairs, played a silly game with balloons, and made sure every kid got a turn with the piñata. I floated between groups of adults, telling little bits of my story. With one parent, I talked about phone control. With another, I mentioned how he had moved into the guest room to punish me, and then pretended it was about space. I painted myself as the tired mother who had to manage everything and a jealous husband at the same time. At one point, I stood with Kelsey and a couple of other mothers near the drinks table. I saw Daniel standing alone by the wall, watching the kids. His hands were in his pockets. He looked tired but calm. Kelsey nudged me and said he seemed like a storm cloud at a picnic. The other mothers laughed. I said he had been trying to control my messages and had threatened to mess with custody if I did not behave. The word custody made their eyes widen. I did not add that he had only talked about stable routines and what-if scenarios. It felt better to say it my way. Without thinking too much, I lifted my phone and recorded a short clip of him from across the room. In the video, he looked a little stiff, like he did not belong. I posted it to my story with some bright birthday stickers and a caption about some husbands forgetting who the party is actually for. Within minutes, hearts and laughing faces started popping up from followers. I showed Kelsey, and we smirked like teenagers. Later, while the kids sat on the floor to eat cake, Rosa pulled me aside near the hallway. She said she had heard Daniel talking to Gareth in the parking lot before they came in. She said they were speaking quietly about meeting someone downtown and getting advice. Her voice dropped lower on the word advice. She asked if I knew what that meant. I shrugged and said, if he wanted to make a fool of himself with some counselor, that was his choice. Inside, my stomach tightened. Advice from who? About what? I shoved the questions away. After the cake, we gathered everyone around the table for Mara to open her gifts. Someone suggested a family photo. Daniel stood next to me, our shoulders almost touching but not quite. Mara squeezed herself between us, holding her new doll. The photographer, another parent, told us to move closer. I forced a smile and leaned in, but Daniel only shifted a little. His face looked careful, like he had put on a mask. I wondered if anyone else could see it. When most of the guests had gone, only close family and Kelsey stayed behind to help clean up. I felt restless, like I had gone to all this trouble and still hadn't fully won. So, when a couple of mothers came to say goodbye, asking politely how we were doing, I let myself talk louder than I needed to. I said Daniel had been punishing me for weeks by sleeping in another room and acting like I was unfaithful over harmless chats. I said he watched my phone like a hawk and made me feel unsafe. The word unsafe made one woman put her hand on my arm in sympathy. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Leah's face tighten. She stepped closer and said, "Maybe we shouldn't discuss private matters at a children's party." Her tone was sharper than I had heard before. I snapped back that if her brother did not want to be talked about, he should not act like a tyrant. Daniel, who had been stacking chairs nearby, looked over. He did not raise his voice or rush in. He just watched for a moment, then turned back to the chairs. Leah walked over to him and said something I could not hear. He nodded. When the hall was finally empty except for us, the room felt too big. Bits of confetti stuck to the floor. The smell of sugary frosting mixed with sweat and plastic toys. Daniel stood by the long table, packing leftover snacks into bags. I walked up with my phone still in my hand. I told him he had ruined the party with his gloom, that everyone had noticed how cold he was. He said he thought the kids had a good time, and that was what mattered. I said I was tired of him acting like a martyr, and that maybe he should move to the guest room permanently, if he hated being near me so much. He looked at me, really looked, and something behind his eyes changed. He said, in a low, steady voice, that he would not keep fighting in public. He said we needed to handle this properly now. I laughed and asked what that even meant, that he wanted to give me a performance review. He did not answer. He just said he would be home a little early the next day and asked if I could be there at 6 so they could go over some things. His calm tone unnerved me more than any shout. That night, after Mara finally fell asleep surrounded by her new toys, I walked past the guest room and saw the faint light under the door. Curiosity tugged at me. I pushed it open without knocking. Daniel sat at the desk, laptop open to a neat list of folders. 2 main ones stood out, Archive A and Archive B. Each held smaller folders with dates. On the side of the desk lay a single USB drive, labeled only with the day's date in black pen. He had taped it under a plain folder marked Taxes, as if hiding it from casual eyes. He saw me looking and closed the laptop with one gentle motion. I asked what he was doing. He said only that he was organizing things and making sure everything was clear going forward. I scoffed and called it dramatic. He did not respond. He slipped the USB further under the folder and told me again, almost politely, that we would talk tomorrow and try to handle things properly. For the first time, I felt a small chill run through me, but I told myself he was bluffing. In my mind, Daniel was still just a quiet man with printed pages, not someone who could actually change my life. Daniel texted that he would meet me downtown to talk things through. I arrived at the glass lobby with Rosa beside me, already planning what I would say to make him feel guilty. Instead of a fight, a stranger in a suit walked up and asked my name, then put a thick envelope in my hands. Behind him stood Daniel and a calm man he introduced as his attorney. Inside were divorce papers, temporary custody orders, naming him main parent on school days, and limits on our shared money. At the bottom, it said future contact must be written, and about Mara only.